Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to catch up and chat with amazing humans about their journey with mental health. For this episode, I'm really happy to invite Amanda Forster-Searle to the conversation. Welcome, Amanda.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So very briefly, I'm going to do a quick introduction, but I'm going to get you to do your real introduction, tell people who you are, what you do. Amanda and I know each other, and this becomes a recurring theme for many of these at the moment because we know each other through social media, through LinkedIn. We both share the same sort of views and passions around supporting the conversation of mental health and evolving this and helping more people. So, Amanda, you do the proper introduction, but pleasure to see you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, so as you say, Amanda Forster-Searle, I'm an emotional freedom and wellness practitioner. And basically, I've trained in many different modalities to help people because I believe that the more tools you have in your toolkit, the more things you have to help yourself. So that includes everything from sort of nutrition, the whole kind of well-being, wellness wheel, if you like. And I'm also a huge advocate of the emotional freedom technique, so tapping. So I use that with clients as well, because I think it's something that you can almost have in your back pocket to help yourself during the day or wherever you might be. So yeah, I'm hugely passionate about helping people on whatever part of their journey they're
Yeah.
on. And that includes everything from, I do a lot of work with women, so empowering women at different stages of their life to kind of take back their ownership of how they create that confidence, that love for themselves, that kind of mental wellness. So I run retreats for pregnant ladies as well who are
Okay.
embarking on their journey to motherhood. I'm a presenter on Serenity Radio, where I talk obviously about what I'm passionate about. And I also do some work for Mindberry, which is a platform that puts a kind of, what would you say it is? It's almost like it is a platform in workplace so that people can come on and book sessions with therapists.
Okay.
So I do some webinars for them, but also my own private work with workplace wellness. And I'm sure there is something I've missed. What have I missed? No, actually, I think I've done good. Yeah. So
Excellent.
just basically empowering people to just embrace who they are and to sort of accept if they're struggling and to actually reach out, and kind of trying to cut down those boundaries of stigma around mental wellness.
Brilliant. So you're doing a whole host of things then, and hosting your own radio show, which is fantastic. So
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, brilliant. So thank you very much for joining this conversation. I really do appreciate it. And I know we're going to have a great conversation about this journey that you've been on as well. So that's
Mhm.
the big question, right? So as I throw it out there, let's see how we go
Yeah.
with this. You take as long as you need, you can explain as much as you want. But the question is your journey with mental health. You
Yeah.
define it, you tell us what you want to share. But
Okay.
this is a safe space to do that. So let's talk about your journey.
Yeah. So obviously, I haven't always done what I'm doing now, and let me think. Going back, I would say my journey with my own mental wellness probably started nearly 13 years ago. I'd just had my daughter, and whilst I was on maternity leave, so I'd only been like 4 months into my maternity leave, my job was threatened, which obviously is not something that can happen, but actually the whole process for the remainder of my maternity leave was really hard. It took the shine off that special time that I was supposed to be enjoying with, my new baby, the worry of not having a job. And I didn't realize it at the time. It's only probably in the last 7 or 8 years have I kind of pieced together that that was almost the pinnacle of where I guess your kind of viewpoint on life got damaged. Because before then, I'd had a really successful career in legal and commercial as a manager. I'd worked in London, I'd commuted, I'd had to go to America for business, so much that suddenly, when that comes crashing down and you suddenly feel that vulnerable at a time when you're changing, and
Yeah.
obviously I was changing as a woman to becoming a mother as
Yeah.
well, it was really hard, really hard. Anyhow, it worked out in the end. I managed to go back to a slightly different position there, and I took longer off because I kind of almost pushed back and said, Now I want a few months to just enjoy my maternity leave. So that worked out. So when I went back, obviously you go through all the changes of part-time working and juggling, picking up from nursery, all that kind of stuff, which again, for women, it's expected, you know, that routine thing and that change. And yet emotionally, I now recognize that of course you're compromised, because before you were totally focused on the work. So I think again, I understand, and that's why I particularly help women now, because I can see those changes that are often kind of just passed by. Anyhow, so I was back at work and it was all working. And then back in 2012, I was basically, part of my job was to expose the company to commercial risks. And we'd acquired a new company, so there was a whole merger thing going on. And my boss, who was head of legal, tasked me to go and kind of find out where the issues were with contracts that we'd inherited. Love doing that, because that's what I was used to doing.
Yeah.
When I found out that there were lots of issues, that's when things changed. I was then not supported, because basically they wanted me to expose the risks, but when the delivery of the message was going to cause friction, my boss kind of just didn't support me.
Right.
So I was therefore kind of feeling really compromised. There was a huge amount of stress on me. It was a very stressful environment because of all the changes. And I was expected to almost try and negotiate contracts, bearing in mind that they weren't on a solid platform to start with. And it was getting really, really draining. And I can remember it was a pivotal moment. I think anyone who suffered from sort of a breakdown will resonate with this.
Yeah.
That there's a pivotal moment, and it might be really insignificant, but it's the thing that almost breaks you, and you then just crumble. And we were literally in the car going down to Kent to get a ferry to go on holiday with our little girl, and I got a message on my BlackBerry, and it was from an email, and it was from my boss copying all of the sales team, basically siding with the sales manager on something he'd raised, and he hadn't even had the decency to speak to me about it. And it basically portrayed me in a really bad light, and yet I'd done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And I can remember sitting in the car and just completely breaking down, because at that moment it was supposed to be my time, my holiday time.
Yeah.
And even then, the fact that technology, is amazing as it is, but it does invade our private life, that moment then, it was just like, well, oh my goodness. So my holiday, before I'd even got there, was totally crushed.
Wow.
And so from then on, even in France, when we were on holiday, again, didn't realize it at the time, but all the signs of stress started kicking in. So I was waking up every hour and a half. I was getting itching all over my body. I was panicky. I couldn't relax. I couldn't switch off. I was irritable. I was, all of these symptoms that I knew that I wasn't happy about work, but I just thought, oh, it'll be fine. I'll go back. Well, when I went back, as in I got back home from holiday, that was when the fear kicked in. And I basically got signed off by the doctors with stress. And I can remember at the time, spending every day was a battle, trying to look after my daughter, trying to get her to school. The HR department wrongly was ringing me, asking me to speak to them. And I seriously, I couldn't even pick up the phone. I was in that place that even a conversation without having to see somebody was too difficult. And yet they didn't respect that. And now, knowing what I know with helping workplaces, there wasn't that understanding necessarily. And quite often, I think the angle that it came from was that they were there for the company, but not for the employee. And that really, really kind of shocked me, because I felt as though I had no support. And the whole focus turned to, well, when are you coming back to work? when are you coming back to work? And the fear, like we were talking earlier before we started this, that fear of even contemplating going to work just was totally overwhelming.
Mm.
So that ended up, after 13 years at that company, me nearly taking legal action because of the details that were part of it. But I got to that point where I just thought, this can either take over and I can get consumed by some sort of legal action, or I can just choose to let it go for my own health. And the doctors wanted me to go on antidepressants. I've always had a real strong resolve of personally not taking, even if I've got a bit of a headache, I don't like to take painkillers and that's my choice.
Sure.
Whatever anyone chooses is their choice. But I felt right in that moment that if I did that, it was just another thing that the company had won, almost forcing me to do something that didn't sit just with me personally. So I ended up basically walking away after 13 years with nothing, absolutely nothing, no goodbyes. Colleagues that I thought were really close friends abandoned me. Didn't have the contact. Even friends, really close friends, couldn't cope with how I was compromised and how I was, not going out, and I was a weak person. And to this day, some of those friendships have never been repaired. And you suddenly realize how fragile you are, because you think you've got a network of people around you, but until something happens, you don't know who is going to be there for you. So obviously financially, really, really, really huge impact. Relationship wise with my husband, huge impact. Again, you don't realize at the time. And we basically downsized and moved to Cornwall. Beautiful, absolutely love Cornwall. But our relationship had taken a toll. So we then went through a period of very, very difficult times. He then got a job to work in Abu Dhabi, and he went. We kind of used that almost as a separation. And I was then on my own in Cornwall with my daughter, trying to, I'll add into this, my training I then went through was that moment of I can't ever go back to doing what I was doing. And so I decided to focus on things that I've always been passionate about and to use my time. So when we moved to Cornwall, I started studying. So I studied nutrition, and I started studying other modalities, which have, to do with mental health, the way we respond to stress and all of that kind of stuff. And so it was a mixed time. It was positive in as much as I was starting to be able to do something for myself, but obviously my world was falling apart on the other side of that. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, we ended up, after 2 years nearly, making the decision that we wanted to repair things, and my daughter and I moved out to live with him, and we sold our house because we needed to pay off this debt because of me not working properly and all of this. And yet our journey wasn't finished there. What should have been a new start, and it was supposed to be for 2 years, then turned into 3 months, and our world got thrown up in the air again. And if anybody knows about working out in the UAE, it's a very volatile environment. And basically, my husband, similarly to me, was being asking to expose risks in what he did, and he was supported by his manager, but the Emiratis didn't want to hear it. So they just get rid of people. If you don't do what they say, they get rid of people. So rather than that happening, he had to make that choice for his own mental health. So after the huge upheaval, we were there nearly 3 months, and we had to come back with nothing and find somewhere different in the UK to live. And he luckily found another job. So I I think in a way this whole resilience thing kicked in, because I think until you're faced with things in your life, you don't actually know how much strength you have to cope with these things. And what might have knocked me down initially, I now actually see as a blessing, because
Yep.
I think it gave me that resilience, and it gave me the fact that, well, do you know what, we've got through that, we'll get through this. And we've now established ourselves in Somerset, and we're really happy. And everything with my business, because obviously that kind of got put on hold,
Yeah.
until we were established somewhere again. But my business is going well. I'm helping more and more people. We're the three of us are happy together again. And like we were saying earlier, it's in a lot smaller kind of capacity than what I was used to with my high flying corporate job. But actually, I'm happier. I'm happier in what I'm doing, but I'm also happier in just a simpler life. So that experience obviously kind of weaves its way through my training, because when you train in different modalities to help people, that is one thing, but when you've got life experience to add to that,
Yep.
I think it gives that other dimension, because you really can understand what people are going through and really help them at a deeper level.
Yeah, we do, and that's exactly the key, isn't it? It's when you can recognize your story. That's why I love this podcast. It's just the ability to listen to people's stories and be inspired by the journeys that people have been on. That's why I always say the journey with mental health, because it's not a destination we're going to hit. We're not going to get to the end. It's that will be at the end of our lives. But the reality is, it's recognizing moments in there that have impact, and taking those moments and saying, it was hard, it was difficult, I was in a bad place, but then also having the ability to look backwards at that and say, but I probably needed to go through some of those things. Would you agree with that?
Totally.
Yeah.
And you know what, I felt that for myself, but the amount of people that I've come into contact with through what I do now, so many have been on that similar journey of almost, if anyone had said to me when I was going through my breakdown, oh, don't worry, you're going to become a holistic practitioner or a mental health practitioner or whatever, I'd be like, ugh. And would I have ever stepped away from a well-paid job to follow my dream of what I love doing or what I was passionate about? No, because we all kind of feel as though we need that security blanket, and we stay what's safe, don't we?
Yeah.
So I do believe that we sometimes have to be thrown up in the air, shaken up a bit, go through this stuff to shift us to where we need to be.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. I think we do, and I think the trouble is you get quite complacent, don't you, in a role or in a place or a position, and you get that sort of that feeling of, oh, I could do this forever, it'll be easier, and actually that's the easy route of life, isn't it? And this journey sometimes needs to have a mountain or a hill to climb, because if you're just on the same flat level for the whole of your life, it's going to be difficult to sort of have good experiences.
Exactly.
So we'll come to what you're doing towards the end of this, if that's okay. But I want to sort of touch a bit in the middle there. So obviously when you were struggling, it was hard. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of the feelings and the thoughts that were going on at that point for you, where you were?
I guess the biggest thing was I felt a failure.
Right.
And I felt a burden to my family. I felt that I wasn't a good mother, because even now, I mean, my daughter's nearly 13 now, and this was obviously sort of 8 years ago, but she still can remember, which is horrible. And in my low times, it would upset me, but now I can talk about it without triggering the emotion. But it's still hard. But she would say, "Oh, Mum, you're always crying."
Right.
I can remember you always crying, and I was no fun to be with. I couldn't, everything just was too much. So I can remember, we may have gone in Cornwall, we may have gone to the beach with the dog, and I couldn't let go. I could not have fun. I could not be the fun person I used to be, because that cloud around my head was still there. And I can remember I can remember it, almost acknowledging that, thinking I'm standing on this beautiful beach, my daughter and dog are jumping, in the waves,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't let myself go to join in.
Right.
And that's how, uh, it's obviously different for everybody, but I think that deep sadness within me, because of how I was feeling, just wouldn't go. And I didn't get the help that I now give other people.
Yeah.
And I think obviously if I had, now I know the tools, I would have been able to let go of that a lot earlier on.
Yeah. And there is this long-term thing of staying it. We let it linger, don't we? We let it grow. We don't address it. We don't want to talk about it, or we don't even want to accept it. It's not us. I had this same conversation with somebody around, the day you accept it is the day we can improve it, or we can make something happen.
Yeah.
And it's a denial element, isn't it?
It is.
Doesn't happen to me, doesn't happen to my family,
No.
It happens to others, and it's not with us.
And I think as well, one of the analogies I use is, whatever we've been through, even from childhood,
Yeah.
unless we do deal with it at the time, or we get help later on to kind of get rid of the layers, it's like we put a sticking plaster on it all the time.
Yeah.
And all that does, it buries it deeper and deeper and deeper. And unless we can get through those layers, at some point, those things are going to come back and cause us, a trigger moment or whatever it might be, that a sticking plaster, as eventually falls off. And sometimes you perhaps need to rip it off to actually get, to get the help you need.
Yeah. Traveling all the way around the outside all the time is never going to get to the center, is it? So we have to peel it back sometimes. Definitely, I agree with that. How has the last year been for you with all of this lockdown changes? Obviously you're at home now, so how have you found that?
I've actually found it, I've actually enjoyed it. I've not enjoyed it for the reasons of those that are struggling, and and to hear the negative side of it, obviously, and those that have sadly got COVID, and families that have lost members. That is awful. And as I'm very empathic, that has been something I've struggled with. But for me personally, I think, at a pivotal point with my business, and I feel that it's actually enabled me to focus more on growing my business and reaching out through, the amazing wonders of technology and things like Zoom and whatever else, that it's enabled me to reach more people with my message. And that's slowing down and not having those, oh, well, I've got to go here and I've got to go here and I've got to take my daughter to school, and that whole kind of routine thing has actually allowed me to just be more flexible and to kind of just go with the flow, and also to be kinder to myself in the process. Because I think, even though we do what we do and we're in the work areas that we're in, we still have to look after our own health. I mean, and I talk a lot about kind of self-love and that kind of filling your cup first and all that kind of thing. But it is so true. And I think when you're working and you've got all these commitments and stuff, sometimes we do forget about ourselves, because it's human nature. So for me, it's allowed a little bit more of that, a little bit more time to kind of get the balance right, and to sort of refocus on what and who I really wanted to help.
Yeah. And who would remind you to look after yourself?
Do you know what? I think it's me.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my husband is incredibly supportive.
Okay.
And he does say to me, you need to just switch off, because as you know, when you work for yourself with all the amazing benefits, when you love what you do, sometimes you can, you'll be working at a crazy hour or at the weekend, and the blurred lines can kick in very easily because you love what you do. So he will be the one to say to me, you need to have time, But again, with lockdown, I've kind of managed to then think, okay, well, for me, that may look like half an hour with a cup of tea, reading some sort of self-help book or empowerment book on my Kindle. and I've made more time for that, and I've made sure that I fit my fitness into my routine, and all the
Brilliant.
things that sometimes can just go out the window, can't they, if you haven't got those habits instilled.
Yes.
And I now can recognize when I need it, and I won't judge myself for taking a break. And I think that's key for everyone to kind of to recognize it, but to then know you can take a break and not,
Yeah.
you know, and that be okay. That's okay. We all need it.
It is, and I think it is that self-love element, isn't it? It's recognizing, but one of the challenges I think that we see, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you give your perspective, is people aren't aware of there's problems. People aren't aware of it's creeping up, because it does creep up. And I can remember when I went through my experiences that I didn't really notice it. People were saying stuff, you know, so like your husband saying take a
Yeah.
break. My wife was exactly like that. And I didn't see it because I just went, no, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm going to be okay, and everything's fine. I just totally denied there was anything going on.
Yeah.
Do you feel that's true?
I think with most people, yes, absolutely, because it it's those symptoms, and like I talked about, you know, some of the symptoms I struggled with when I had my breakdown, it wasn't just the psychological symptoms of how I felt, it was the physical symptoms. And so, you know, I was waking up every an hour and a half. My body was itching.
Yeah.
I was feeling like I was, you know, I drunk loads of caffeine, that kind of, you know, adrenaline, which we now
Yeah.
know is cortisol and everything kicking off with the stress hormones.
Yeah.
But you don't realize it at the time. But when you look back, and obviously the study I've now done over the years, and you
Yeah.
realize, well, of course your body's going to tell you. Your body is going to give you
Yeah.
signals. The thing is, for every single person, those signals will be different.
Yeah.
So there is no black and white of, oh, this is what you should look out for. You know, for
Big
every
challenge.
single person, it's different.
Yeah. But I think, you know, again, it's just down to that support element, which is why I asked you who supports you or who tells you, you know, or reminds you. My wife's exactly that. You know, having a partner that actually tells you is not it's not moaning normally. You know,
No.
I would have put it under the label, stop moaning at me, leave me alone. You know, that would have been my previous version of myself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now I know that if something's being said, it means that something's not quite right from their perspective. And I think that's such an
Yeah.
important part of this is accept their perspective is their perspective, right? It's not that
Yeah.
they're just saying it because they think you should, you know, they think that's what you think. And so it is critical in this conversation of mental health. So we are coming towards the end of this. Bizarrely, we're running rapidly out of time, but I want you to sort of say the last things about what you're doing, how people can get in touch with you, any websites, anything that you want to
Yeah.
share. Of course,
Cool.
I'll share links in all of this anyway. But from me, I'm just going to say a huge thank you for what you're doing, of course, for the journey that you've shared, and the way that you've
Thank
shared it
you.
is fantastic, you know, in terms of not fantastic what you've been through, but fantastic that you can talk about it and share it and support others through that too. So last thoughts, Amanda, anything you want to share?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, as I say, I do one-to-one sessions.
Yeah.
I also will always offer a free initial consultation, because I think it's
Okay.
important for people to resonate with me and to
Yeah.
see how I can help them. But I also, as I say, for women, I've just started this amazing venture with a friend of mine called "You Are a Woman, That Is Your Superpower,"
Okay.
to focus on empowering women with their self-love, their kind of body confidence, their mental health. So you're going to be hearing more about that.
Brilliant.
My business page is called Nourish Healing. So my website's nourishhealing.co.uk. I'm obviously on all social media platforms. And my radio show, if you're interested in listening, I've been currently talking about how to create the best year for yourself ahead. So we've been looking at everything from like imposter syndrome,
Okay.
nutrition. That is on at the moment at 8 o'clock on a Monday evening on
Okay.
Serenity Radio, which is an on internet-based radio station. So you can get it on Alexa and everything. And yeah, I'm just basically helping people, individuals, groups, in workplace, in small settings, so like groups of pregnant ladies. Yeah, so if people resonate with me, then I'd love to hear from them, because I'm always willing to just help and share the message as much as possible.
Amazing stuff, brilliant. And you're a great advocate for mental health, supporting the conversations of well-being and everything else. So keep doing what you're doing. That's
Thank
basically
you. Thank
the
you.
key to it, isn't it? Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So as I would always say at the end, just if you are listening to this, if you have been struggling or you are worried about anything, if you've got any sort of thoughts in your head that you need some extra help to just talk about, please know there's always somebody out there that cares. There really is. You shouldn't feel alone through any of this. And I know there's many people that do. Samaritans exist today to offer a safe space to talk. If you do want to talk to somebody, you can call for free on 116 123, or you could text to shout 85258. Just talk to somebody just through a messenger if you don't feel comfortable talking on the phone. But please always do know there is somebody there. It's so important. These conversations hopefully help somebody at some point somewhere. Keep sharing, keep liking, keep following, subscribing and everything else. And the more that we talk about mental health, the better we can make it all for everybody. So that's what we're trying to do. So Amanda, again, thank you so much. I'll
Thank
speak to you soon.
you.
You look
Take
after yourself.
care. Take
Take
care.
care. Bye.
Bye-bye.